Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com and alexmercedcoder.work. And today I want to continue talking about different sort of web trends that I've noticed and things that I'm learning about. So today I want to talk about web components. Now, what's a web component? So basically the idea is this. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to create your own HTML tags that you can just plop into your project and then just generate some sort of item, whether it be a modal or a navigation menu or a slider, and it just works, okay? And you can use it over and over again in many, many different projects. Now, this is part of the promise and why things like Angular, React, Vue, Ember are so popular, because you're able to sort of create reusable pieces. The problem is, within those frameworks, you have to reuse those pieces within those frameworks. So different component makers would have to make a version of it for React, a version of it for Angular, a version of it for Vue, which just means you're doing the same work 3 times. Because the syntax, the way these infrastructures function was different. Eventually, a standard for creating such components was sort of released. So now you can actually just create web components that are not part of any particular framework. You don't need to install any framework. They just work straight out of JavaScript. And then you can just plop them in like an HTML tag. So you can learn how to just create the component through just normal vanilla JavaScript, or you can use many different sort of frameworks that are built around sort of creating these sort of framework agnostic web components. So probably the one I know and I'm familiar with the most is Stencil J. So this was made from the same people who made Ionic, all the Ionic components that originally were mainly used in Angular, and since then have been turned into sort of web agnostic web components that can be used across all the frameworks. But so there's the Ionic components, and then StencilJS is the tool to create more components. And it has its own syntax, very similar. It has a TypeScript that you might be familiar with from using Angular. It has a lot of the JSX that you might be familiar with from React. And what it does is that instead of you creating some code and it's kind of within that framework, you would just code your application or component within Stencil, and then you would compile it, and it would compile it to web standard code. Okay, so this way you can take the same component, and then as web standards change and JavaScript changes, HTML, CSS changes, you just recompile it, and it just continues to meet the same standards. So basically, it makes it easier to sort of continue meeting web standards because you're just recompiling the same code, and then the compiler is what basically keeps track of the standards. At least that's sort of the promise of Stencil. Lit-HTML is, I think, another library that is for creating web components. Polymer from Google is another framework for creating web components. I think Svelte is built around making web components. So there are several tools out there, and now they're starting to create libraries, places where you can go out there and just download web components that the people created, so you can use them in your projects. So this world where you don't have to be, where your team doesn't have to be married to a particular set of because what you see in across different like firms and whatnot is that different teams at the company, they may be using the same sort of design philosophy, same colors, same logos, but the underlying code, some of it may be in Vue, some of it may be in Angular, some of it may be in React, because different teams across the firm are used to working in different stacks and different frameworks. And so this creates where, okay, well, this team, we need to have people who know this, and this team, we need to know this, and then this team can't really create something that this team can reuse because they're using a different framework. So you can have an Angular team at your company, and then but all basically Angular, Vue, and React teams, and across all 3 of them, they could have the same sort of unifying set of components to create sort of more uniform UX design, because even though the underlying code may be in whatever framework, the components that the user is interacting with can be more uniform because of things like web components and all these tools to create web components. So that's why I can only expect that the usage of web components will only grow in time, which is why learning things like Stencil and Polymer are probably useful things to add to your bucket list of things to learn. Probably not going to become the norm or the standard for a while, but it even opens up the potential that, suddenly you just go entirely web component. So it's an interesting thing. Again, the idea here is to talk about trends that I think that are going to be going stronger in 2020 and on, And my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, alexmercedcoder.work. Check out my portfolio. Please do join my networking Slack so that way you can network with other developers, new and experienced, so that way we can all help each other, support each other, whatnot. You know, there's a lot of work to be done, and a lot of it needs to be done together. So go join in. I'd love to talk to you. Have a great day and enjoy.